Can we start with talking about what is the good daughter syndrome? And as you're describing to us what it
Mhm.
is, if you could help us understand how being good could ever be not good.
Yes, I'll unpack the initial concept. So, when you have an attuned, sensitive, empathic daughter who is born to a mother who's difficult for a variety of reasons, she could be narcissistic, borderline personality disorder, or in the case of intergenerational trauma, just difficult. When you pair those two, it's a dyad. Many times, what you get is an unhealthy dynamic whereby the daughter, in working to be good for the mom, does too much of the relational work in the relationship, and you get an unbalanced relationship. I can probably anchor that in my own story, how I came to this work,
Oh, that'd be
and that
awesome.
might,
Thank you for
okay,
sharing
okay.
that.
And folks may resonate with some of it, none of it, part of it, because it is an individual story. So if we were to time travel 35 years ago, I was in my early 30s, and I just finished graduate school. I was starting in private practice. I was married to a nice man. I started having my babies. I have two girls. On the outside, from the outside looking in, I kind of had it all. However, a closer look would reveal I was really paralyzed with depression. It's, and depression is like a wet blanket on everything. You don't have energy or enthusiasm for anything. I was exhausted. I cried easily. I doubted myself. I couldn't make a decision without second guessing. And I had no idea why. And there I'm a
You're a
therapist.
therapist.
I'm a therapist in private practice. That's not good. So, also to paint the picture, but more, I was in practice with my psychologist mother. It had always been her dream to have a mother-daughter practice. And being the good daughter, the good soldier, I thought I was in the right place. 35 years ago, nobody talked about boundaries or enmeshment, or if they did, I didn't hear them. A lot of the attention was people that were acting out, cutting, anorexia, acting in various ways we act in, depression. Those things didn't get much attention because it didn't cause many problems in the world. While the good
Mm.
daughters are making things run. Anyway, so we were like two peas in a pod. However, one pea was always in charge. And as I said, my mother was very smart, charismatic, convincing, articulate. There wasn't any decision that she didn't weigh in on. There wasn't any relationship, including the one with my husband, that she wasn't part of. It's three people in a marriage. As I was becoming a new parent, it was unwanted parenting advice. And she was critical and demanding. And I told myself, this is for my own good. She just wants me to be the best that I can be. So all this was normalized in my mind.
Of
So when I
course.
got into more psychotherapy, it was came as a shock to me that I was really furious. I was enraged by
Mm.
being micromanaged. I felt suffocated. And psychodynamically, anger that's introjected becomes depression. I said, I'm not angry. I'm just depressed. My mother's always right, and she knows best, and she certainly knows me. And she'd been in practice at that point longer than I had. So, anyway, I'll never forget the day that I walked into her office the office that, we shared. And I said, Mom, I've got to leave home. And I knew it would break her heart, and it did. But as I write my book, staying was going to break me. So it was one of those really pivotal, you go left or you go right. And, I was scared to death to do it. But looking back 35 years later, my mother's gone. I kept sort of rewind. I kept running into daughters who would come to me who had problematic moms or a problematic dynamic. And they were good. They frequently had been to a therapist before me who would have said, well, your mom's narcissistic, or given the mom a label. They would have felt so guilty they quit that therapist.
Oh my God. I can relate to that.
I saw that so many times. It became just kind of an expected, because it's so threatening. If you're describing a bad boyfriend or somebody who's completely opportunistic or a jerk, and then you're trying to get over a breakup and you come to a therapist and you describe it, and the therapist may say, well, have you considered he's this, that, or the other? That's kind of welcomed on some level because the relationship is over.
Oh, interesting. It's so interesting that you said that, Katherine. When I was young, I must have been a junior in high school, and you talked about acting in. I was acting in. I don't know if you just watched me hesitate. I was about to say I was bulimic, but I was only bulimic for a very short time because someone who cared a lot about me, one of my friends, told my mom because they were worried about me. And so my mom actually did something which I'm surprised and I'm really proud of her for. She took me to a therapist. So go, Mom. Thank you. And I went to the therapist, and the therapist within a very short time started asking about my relationship with my mother. And I was like, that is disloyal. And I will, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to not throw up.
I sure
So that my mom's not in trouble. And I'm going to ditch this therapy thing and we'll all be happily ever. It's interesting that you mentioned, though, that anger becomes depression because when I got to college, I was feeling what I would now describe as depressed. I didn't have language for what I was feeling. And I went to the on-campus, there was like free therapy there. And it was similar, but I couldn't pull out of it to make myself not so that she would look good. I relate to so much of what you just said. And even the disloyalty still, I love that you're naming this because no, I'm not the only one. We don't need to label what our mom is or isn't, if she's narcissistic or difficult or personality traits. It's just, can you help me with some language for me and for anyone else who's feeling too disloyal to put a label on anything? It's just not working for us.
I think unbalanced is
an unbalanced relationship. That's
where all the relational work. So, you're born, evolutionary mandate is love the one you're with, right? So your survival brain tells you, so you're going to get fed and cared for. And if not every baby is like this, but if you're attuned and relational, you're doing the work to keep mom engaged. Mom could be drunk or she could be distracted. I think in some ways it does matter what is going on with mom, but pre-verbally and even verbally, when you're doing more of the work, and then that continues, so then you hit points of individuation where separation would most naturally happen. So the first one would be the quote unquote terrible twos. I'll do it myself, which is, I'm a mom. That was a hard time. But a mother who is very hard to separate from is going to see that as an attack on her personhood or her motherhood instead of weathering. Again, these junctures there's understandable tension, and I don't ever mean to put forth the idea that it's easy by any means. So you've got the toddlerhood, and then you've got elementary school, and Does mom pick all your friends? Is there separation anxiety? Are there school phobias? That's another juncture, separation. So elementary school, then middle school. It's really hard in the best of circumstances. But what, could be conflict turns out to be full out Armageddon, to where you're just completely butting heads. I personally was just subversive. She thought I was doing one thing. I had kind of, and then I just flew under the radar and did all my acting out. She didn't see it. But that leaves a daughter feeling incredibly guilty.
You write about this in the book, but there are other types of good daughters. I was a different type. I did that sometimes, but most of the time I just towed the line and did what I was supposed to do. And I often felt like I had to choose between who I was supposed to be and who I knew I was inside. And it was something I wrestled with for well into my adulthood, which is just that and you write about it really eloquently in the book, that there's definitely more than one way.
Yeah, so true. Because the impulse to individuate doesn't go away. I've even seen clients who would act out and be bad girls so they could feel guilty. Unconsciously, they would do it so they could feel guilty and come back into mom's good graces and feel bad about the person they had been when they were acting out.
When really they were just trying to stand up for themselves
they're trying to stand up, but unconsciously they felt ashamed of it. And so in a way, quote unquote, mom won, because and that was me acting out in a way that made me feel bad about myself. If there's a broader lane, and certainly parents should be the guardrails, but it should be a broader, like picking your own music, and there are different ideas about this, and that's an individual call. But when you hear moms like reading all the text messages, you can't close your door. That's a big one.
The word privacy and secrecy were one word in my house.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So meaning possibly
secretive versus why you're wanting some privacy.
And we all need it.
If you can't tell me, then you must be up to no good.
Jeez. And it forces us to have like a persona that's more solid than it can be. I heard somebody describe adolescents as soft shell crabs.
Wow. If someone's listening and one, this is resonating, it might be like, whoa. Or two, if they're a parent, it might be like, how am I doing here? And so I just take a moment to slow it down. And what I already heard you say, and I want to really name for those of us that are parents and may or may not have rocked the individuation stages perfectly ourselves. And when I say perfectly, maybe like not well at all. The individuation's hard. It just is. I guess I'd love to just for a moment remind everybody that it's never too late, even if they're young adults. Even now with my young adult children, I can be like, oh, sorry. As I'm doing this work, I realized when you were this age, this is what I did. So if you want to unpack that with me or someone else, or just...
I do that all the time. My kids are around 30. I think the ideal is you never stop doing that. That repair is so, I know you would agree, repair is so much more important than perfection. And there is no completely getting it right. I think you can hold as a value individuation. I think that's the difference, that you hold the space in your brain. Wait a minute. Or if you have adult children and you didn't do, who does, that's just not even possible. Who does everything the way that you wished you had? I didn't. I've been very difficult at different junctures. And I found talking about it with my adult children can be helpful. And I think I'll just say this one thing: moms on the personality disorder spectrum. A personality disorder is pervasive and persistent. It's not a 1 off. It's not a 5 off. It's not a 30 off. But But I mean, that is I have mixed feelings about diagnoses, but that is what it's supposed to be captured. And that's what I find with my 35 years of psychotherapy with daughters. I have yet to have anybody come in who's overly condemning of their mother, who doesn't want more than anything to have the hard conversations with her, who wouldn't jump at the chance to be open if their mother was open. And I've been doing this work for a pretty long time, and you would think I would run into somebody like that, and that's not the way it's fallen out.
Though, can I pull something you'd said earlier into this moment, which is the anger that you felt? Because not condemning hit my ears in a funny way, because I know that I spent a long, like, first of all, I spent forever in the mental gymnastics of not seeing it at all. But when I finally did see it, I was so angry. And anger stage isn't like a day or a week or a month. I mean, it was, I don't remember, but it was definitely a couple of years where I was just angry, and below the anger, of course, was hurt and wanting to be loved, seen, understood, cared for, which is the birth of the remothering work, because we can have that for ourselves. But so when I just want to bring that anger in this moment, because the condemning kind of struck my ears, because if you'd asked the angry one of me, I don't know if that would have sounded condemning or not. It was definitely angry.
And if you think about anger, it's energy, right? And it's basic. And it's healthy energy, because it's healthy to want to differentiate, to go on your own trajectory. And not every difficult mother, but some difficult mothers wield power. And you need some anger because that helps you harness that anger in order to recognize, make even set initial boundaries. It is problematic if you stay there. And I think here's the paradox. And I'll even kind of jump into one of the things we talked about. One of the mistakes that I see daughters make when they're setting boundaries, they'll say, "What I tried to set a boundary, but it didn't work." Both I resonate with that. This is what I would do with my mom. I would swallow it, her intrusiveness, or she was kind of bossy. She was that variety of the difficult mother. So lots of power and lots of insistence, lots of bossiness energy. So I would feel angry, swallow it. And then I would explode. And it would come out. I would sound like a lunatic. It would come garbled.
I have been there.
So is anger a good or bad thing? I think it's not one thing. And then I would feel so guilty. I'd be like, oh, I sound bizarre. I'm exploding. I was being very reactive towards the straw that broke the camel's back, or whatever was going on with me that day. But I was really angry about the buildup and my inability to stand up to her as an adult. And then I would cave into guilt. Oh, I didn't mean that. What's going on with you? And be like, well, I don't know. And then would easily deflect, well, I'm just really mad at my husband, or blah, blah, blah. And then we would ally and triangulate against a third thing.
Oh, thank you so much for naming these dysfunctional relational dances we get into. And it's so interesting as I'm hearing you say that, and you're talking about it's fascinating, because when we're in it, we don't see it as clearly as you're telling the story. It's so much more evident. So I do a question. Well, let me actually check my list and see what questions in this good daughter syndrome relational dance. Why can it be so hard sometimes to set boundaries? And then what advice do you have for us to set boundaries?
I think it's, to use an old analogy, but it's the tip of the iceberg. So if you have an enmeshed relationship with mom, there's an implicit idea that's what's good for mom is good for you, right? It would just be that there would be no difference, be no differentiation. So just the idea of boundaries can feel disloyal.
Mm.
Why wouldn't it? You're going against a cultural myth. The imaginary culture asks you, why do you need boundaries? Why is there some harm? Like, does your mom mean you harm? Why do you need protection?
Oh, that's hanging something from me right there, that question. Yeah, like, why do you need, and you don't, and then you feel terrible.
So just the act of entertaining the idea of needing boundaries, I think, pulls up the disloyal piece. And so then for me, the answer has been developmental psychology. At these different junctures, it is healthy to, be in relationship, but to be individuating. Mom's working herself out of a job.
Mm.
That's the role. That's the job. It's almost like this when somebody says, "How do I know I have the good daughter syndrome?" I would say, do you need for mom to be okay and okay with you in order for you to be okay?
Wow. Can we pause for just a moment?
That,
And I'd like to invite everybody listening to
yeah.
just notice what Katherine just said and notice what's feeling important there for you. What what's sparking for you? And maybe take a moment to integrate that, because that was a really big sentence. It was simple and not at the same time. It's a really big sentence.
And all that implies.
Yeah.
Mm. As opposed to, it's like you have a best friend and you love her and you have her back and you guys resonate. You think the same things are funny. You have maybe even a history with that person. She's seen you go in and out of relationships. She's seen you at your best. She's seen you at your worst. When she's upset, chances are when you're with her, you empathize, you're present. When the visit's over and you go home and you're in your own space, your own emotional space, chances are, I would think, you can be okay. And that
Mm.
doesn't mean that you don't care about her. You care deeply. Another kind of tell I would hear from my clients is when they get on the phone with mom, they know 5, 10 seconds if they're in trouble or where the conversation is going to go. I used to say about my own mother, she'd be like loaded for bear. I knew just that I could tell in 3 seconds. I thought I could, but it was pretty accurate. Do I need to deflect and have a shiny ball and tell her something funny? And then all the effort would be in satisfying, but I'd be just like, oh no, I know where this is going from tone of voice. And that's not even when you're in the presence of someone and they're an eye roll or shoulder shrug or all this implicit information is being exchanged. And of course, why wouldn't it?
And two things here. One is, if you want to learn more, there's a blog post at remothering.org about implicit memory that goes into more details. And then maybe, Katherine, I wonder if it makes sense to circle back around to your story about when you had to let her know that you were going to no longer be in private practice with her and what happened there. Because I think that there's probably a lot to learn and pull out from that.
Okay, yeah. Well, initially I felt very guilty. I would say 5 years into it, I did get the you did the right thing from my mother.
Wow.
I did get that. And here's a little bit. My mother was a psychotherapist and she had a lot of analysis and she came part of the way. So she at times could be the mom I needed,
Wow.
but then her own trauma but I would say 75% of the time she would slip back.
That's
And
confusing, actually.
yes, it is confusing. Uh, and that's probably pretty unusual. She came from a lot of trauma and had a lot of difficulty early on. So she had a longer way to go. So she was very, very functional and not in practice for that long because she got a PhD kind of late in life. Later on, she got dementia. I would say in between when I left, and thank you for the question, and the end, that differentiation and individuation had to be renegotiated. So I got really good at it. We would never no contact, but I was prepared to do that. But yeah, we wouldn't, for a while, we stayed in endless back and forth, like emails. And oh my gosh, it could just, I don't know if anybody will resonate with this, but it would just hijack my day. I would withdraw from my kids, I would withdraw from my husband. She was also a debate champion. So there's that. So
Literally or figuratively?
literally, and really, really, really smart. She took an IQ test in school and they called her parents in and said she cheated because they'd never had such a high IQ. So this was a very smart person who was also very traumatized, who also had come part of the way, just not all the way. So a mistake, it's almost like I say, I just hope I can flatten the learning curve for other good daughters, because I spent years in these stuck places trying to explain if I just put it the right way, if I just posited it in a way she would understand, I could get through to her. But
to flatten the curve, what is the answer? Can we get through?
that's a good question. Instead of appealing, see, that was like a one down. I really wanted her approval and permission to do what I was doing. That she was never going to give me. Not really. She couldn't sustain it. And so by arguing and over explaining, I was stuck in this loop instead of, and what I finally did, Mom, I'm going to have lunch with you every other week. I know we've talked about that. There's something really magical about that in a public place. It's lunch. Lunch doesn't go on forever. And I gave her something she could count on. No, it's not what she wanted. It's not all that she wanted, but it was something. And when I call it power, and I don't mean that in a, big bully way, but when I met her kind of power with my power, instead of explaining and really wanting permission, there was a way in which she respected it. And I'm like, I'm not explaining why I'm going to do this. I'm just going to do this.
And what's interesting is, wow, I'm so happy for you that she met it with the respect. It's almost irrelevant how she met it because you met yourself. And bringing it back to the remothering moment, it's like that safety within yourself to be like, this is what's up. However you react is on the other side of my boundary. If I have in my boundary, it's like how you're reacting is a you thing. How I'm showing up is a me thing.
And ultimately, I mean, it's not like she liked it or she wouldn't get in digs or email me, respond ASAP. This was a big one for that. It was less action and more in restraint. Tuning into myself, having the self-confidence, having the resolve. This is what I need to do. I'm sorry if that upsets you.
So back to the boundaries then with these mothers as a good daughter.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing you say is to have that inside out connection and then to be tuning into what we need versus what she needs when we're setting the boundary. Am I getting that right?
Mm-hmm. And so hard, or was for me, this is another thing, to understand if I upset her, okay? I knew she didn't like something. I was in the habit of assuming I knew how she felt. That she would feel the way that I would feel. But I came to realize, I think this is so important, I can be attuned and I can really be cued into her, know when I'm in trouble, all that kind of stuff. But I don't know as much as I think I know. And I'm not that powerful because she had a whole lifetime before I ever came along with these defenses. I put it in psychodynamic language, with these defenses, and she's been able to deal effectively with the world. So if I take myself out of it, even though she's used to coming to me for, some people call it supply or resonance, she's not, dead in the water. If I take myself out of it, she'll do her thing with other people. And I often find, I don't know if this is true all the time, but that good daughters tend to be like, oh, we hold on to stuff, beat ourselves up, you reflective, we're so worried how the other person feels. And that's just not how everybody rolls, I've had clients say, well, I did the hard thing with my mother, and I'm sure she was like so upset. But then I saw her on Facebook, like in a big gathering, she's having the time of her life. Wait a minute, is that same mom?
Like she might not actually be so upset.
She
Or
might not.
actually, but back to what we were just saying, and almost it doesn't matter. Like
It doesn't, like, it just underscores you may think you know, but you don't actually know. And guess what? You're not really responsible. It's an inside job. It just
I'm
helps.
really holding on to that one. And guess what? It's not our job anyway. That's so big. That's so big.
And you don't know as much as you think. I think you have, when you're a child and you're faced with a mom who would be distracted or upset or going on the offense, it's so scary that the defenses that you develop, you tend to overvalue or you amplify their value because it'd be too terrifying to think that you're just really not that powerful.
So what I'm hearing you say is that it's really very healthy to think that we are. So if one of our adaptations we're realizing as we're listening to you talk is that we do an emotional management behavior, we assess what's going to happen and we try and keep it peaceful, then of course it makes sense. Of course, it was helpful to think that we were that powerful and that we did need to be responsible for other people's feelings.
Survival thing. Plus, with our cognitive literal immaturity, we tend to think more black and white.
At that age.
So an egocentric, that's not an insult. That's just the way a young child thinks. That's just Piaget. That's just intelligence development. So that's another reason why those things get encoded in such a literal black and white sort of way, because the original way that we think about it is that way. And then that exists in our unconscious implicit brain.
But then, and let's actually circle back to that. Can you give a sentence about implicit brain? And then also some hope that neuroplasticity is on our side.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is. Maybe I can give an example that doesn't have to do with moms.
That'd be great.
So if you're afraid of snakes like I am, like you're hiking and you see out of the corner of your eye, you see, it's also called your fast brain, you see a squiggly stick and you jump back. Your fast brain, your implicit memory is that squiggly equals snake. And so you jump back, you act on that before you're able to think about it. And then you look at it and it's a stick and it's wintertime and it wouldn't be poisonous anyway. And then so you can recalibrate. So when you have experience,
love that word.
yep, you can recalibrate. And the thing about feeling like you have that much power and then realizing you don't is you also don't have that much responsibility. A double-edged sword. It's just how you thought as a child, and it is accessible. And that's one mechanism of psychotherapy. It's actually a very old concept in transference and countertransference. Feelings you might have towards your therapist that aren't really about them, but then when you talk about them, they melt away like the snow with more experiences of that. And you rewire your brain.
Wow. Thank you for that, Katherine. Between your stories and your concepts that you talked about, touched on here a little bit, and even more in the book, The Good Daughter Syndrome. I'd like to invite everyone to notice what's resonating for you. And as Katherine said, some of it may not, none of it might, all of it might. What's resonating? And as it's resonating, what clues are you noticing about your adaptations? One of the things I'm pulling out is that it's not our responsibility. It's such a powerful reminder. But there's so much more here. So what is here for you? What is here for you?
What a good question.
So, Katherine, something that we've touched on a little bit throughout this, and it's something that Dr. Lindsay Gibson talks about in her book on adult children of emotionally immature parents, which is that healing fantasy when we're still hoping and hoping that our parent can change. How do we know if that's possible? It's like, yes, we don't want to hold on to hope for something that is not possible. But in a healthy relationship, assuming positive intent, assuming someone can move into more healthy relational dynamics, when can you trust repair, I guess is where I'm going with that. When can you trust repair?
Oh, that's a good question. I might have a 3-part answer. And I'm going to go back to the psychodynamic concept of something gets termed a personality disorder when somebody's coping mechanisms are persistent and pervasive. So how does that apply to your own particular mother? If, say, something that bothers you about your mom, let's say criticism, or she needs to be superior. Mom always needs to be right. Does she need to be right in every situation that you know of, and with everybody, and throughout time? Is it this really a choice for her? So a defense mechanism is not a choice. Nobody decides to be like, I'm going to just be the most obnoxious person I can think of, and I'm, going to blow up my ego and be right all the time. In fact, a defense is a response to an inner feeling that a person can't tolerate. Let's just take that superiority. So the feeling of unworthiness and shame is so great that a narcissistic personality develops a defense of, I'm in fact better than everybody. I'm superior. I'm always right. Everything has to be about me. Now, we all like to feel good about ourselves. We all, when we're feeling crappy about ourselves, we're going to look for something to make us feel better. That's just the human condition. For a mother who's not likely to change, if you can kind of take a step back and say, does this just happen around certain topics? Or when she's stressed out, that's human. That bodes for a greater possibility of change. I had this one client a long time ago whose mom, she suspected she was narcissistic, and she said, well, she breaks in line all the time, and she lies all the time, and she parks in handicapped parking spaces all the time. This had nothing to do in her relating. So this mom would be more likely to not have the accessibility to change.
Gotcha.
So
what I'm hearing you say is part one is pervasive and everywhere, and there's probably no healing fantasy. Just let it go and accept what is.
Yeah, it's not likely.
Part two is there are these hot topics, and so when that's not flaring or pinged, the rest of it seems to be more like, oh, this is the mom that I have. And then maybe there's opportunity to carefully navigate, maybe with the support of a therapist, but just navigating that hot topic. And there's some hope potentially, possibly, if both people are willing to work on it. And then what would be the third part of that answer?
And then the third would be, like, say you've been holding a lot of stuff and you confront mom and she's defensive. Okay, that's understandable. When she calms down and she comes back to you, or you come back to her, or our guys are back in relationship, when she's in a more regulated state, can she then, or can you both approach it? And is there repair possible, or does she just dig in, never going to give in on this one thing? You're always wrong, she's right, and you face this wall of rigidity again and again. Actually, the first has a lot to do with the third, but it's just another way that you can tell.
I like that distinction between the first and the third, though, because what's interesting to me is when I popped myself a note so I could come back to it, is when I heard you describing the first one, that everything, it is different, because that third one, what I'm hearing you say is that could be how she behaves specifically with you consistently.
Yeah.
Because what I've found, their mom might be a certain way with them because they feel like she feels like her daughter represents her. So she treats her daughter differently than she treats other humans in the world, because it's like she's an extension, like she's an accessory, like your purse or your arm, or like you represent her. It's not differentiated, back to what you were talking about earlier. So it's not consistently a behavior across every other human, maybe not even across like another sibling. So scenario number 3 really is, how consistent are her behaviors moving into repair versus defenses? Am I getting that right?
Is she capable of repair, which involves some kind of self-reflection, which also involves being able to step back and not just coming at you with the defense, no matter what.
Thank you for that. That's really helpful. And it really all comes back down to recognizing, are we holding on to a healing fantasy? And if we are, is it possible or is it unlikely? And either way, probably just working on our own adaptations first anyway.
I think it's helpful. And I mean, the internet has done, some good and some bad, but as opposed to when I first started off in practice, people had no idea that mothers weren't anything but saints, and they were just supposed to forgive and forget and deny, instead of, no, your mother is just human, and she can be along this continuum of difficult. And at the same time, I think motherhood pulls on it's going to touch the weakest link in the chain, of course. Why wouldn't it? And what we ask of women, the feminist in me says what we ask of women in motherhood is just, it's incredible, to attach and then to let go. What other role are we asking anybody to do that? Like, attach with your whole being and sacrifice and get up at night and feed your kid when you're hungry, and get up at night and attend to them when you're sleepy. And then guess what? Let them go. Detach. Get your own source of good feeling. I think it's incredible.
I'm hearing you say, and I really appreciate you bringing that into the space, is just compassion. Compassion for ourselves and our own journey, compassion for the other humans, one of them who may be our mom. And then bringing something else you said, just because we have compassion doesn't make it our responsibility.
Doesn't make it our responsibility. And people are capable of all kinds of things. Just because they have a title doesn't mean they mean well,
Or even if they mean well, doesn't mean they can do well or have capacity or better.
And some don't mean well. I have run into that. And I think that's appropriate to call out for women, daughters who have moms who just don't mean well, and they're not really even trying. Because when those daughters come to me, it's so hard, because their best friend, I like, your mom did the best you can. You only have one mom. And
oh my gosh, I'm like,
they have that very, very different experience.
And that's actually my last question, Katherine, as far as the healing journey, in your experience, this is off topic of your book, but we named it a little bit in terms of mental gymnastics and then anger and acceptance. Do you see a pattern that people follow in their journeys, their healing journeys?
It's funny because it kind of parallels a hero's journey. I think people are frustrated, and so they want their frustration explained, and so they either reach out and read blog posts or the internet these days, and then they become angry because they see the relationship's like, oh, that's me, and the relationship is unbalanced, and a third party is describing it, and they realize it's unbalanced, and it probably always has been. There is a tendency to, like, if mom's been controlling you, like, okay, I'm going to turn the tables and I'm going to control her. She's been making me feel bad. So I'm going to turn the tables and probably a lot of us are guilty of this. Look, mom, you fit all these categories. Admit it. You're messed up. Like,
Oh,
can you
that's
just agree that
funny.
you're messed up, mom? And she's just generally just not going to do that. So, but I think that's important way station because you're gathering up energy, and even that is differentiating. Okay, not one glom together. Somebody's saying, "Oh, you're an individual. I'm addressing your experience." And so, yes, we can stay angry and then trying to kind of plead to see you fit all these criteria. Or I'm going to explain it. We want her to be, I would say, what I've seen, we want her to be the mom that we need her to be.
Mm.
And then comes exhaustion and acceptance. Maybe it's more Kubler-Ross in the hero's journey, but finally, like denial. Then you do the work of
So Kubler-Ross, for those that don't know, is the stages of grief.
Stages of grief and death and dying.
Mhm.
And then you can come to a stage, hopefully, of acceptance. She's who she is. I had the experience that I've had. And that's, I think, when the real healing happens. And it's tricky because if you stay in anger for too long, that you can just like live to prove how bad your mom is. And every conversation with, your partner and your best friend is, and they're kind of like, yeah, you've told me this a million times. When are you going to stop falling for it? When are you going to make some real changes? So, but I think that's probably important before you set boundaries to kind of do some of
Work
the
some of the
internal work.
healing. So what I'm hearing you say is the healing journey, hero's journey, Kubler-Ross, it's almost,
Yeah.
it's all part of the healing journey. The anger.
Yes.
And so how would I mean, maybe, I don't know if there's really an answer. How would someone know that they've spent enough time in anger and it is
Yeah.
time to move on? Because we don't want to shortcut
Mhm.
our anger and do the good girl thing.
I mean, I can still get incensed and think, wait a minute, that was so unfair. I think ultimately the work is to look, whatever your mom's defenses were, say if it was superiority, you know. So then when you accept your work as equanimity, and if your mother couldn't let go, where are you not letting go in your life? Because you didn't have an example of how to do that.
Mm.
All these, and I spell them out more in the book, but all these things that she had trouble with, when you take it on as your job, wow, how can I challenge myself? And in a way, the breadcrumbs are there for your own development, right there in her difficulties. And that's different than, say, if you have a child and you're indulging that child, you could never set limits with your mom, or you were micromanaged by her. And so then you're indulgent with your child. You're kind of doing a flip side of the same coin. That's not really healing, but being able to set those boundaries, to say no, to tune inward. And you're a lot of help with that, Simona. Now, you know a lot about that. Yeah, to develop that self-attunement, that's good at any part in the journey. I think when you really accept, okay, it's my work. I mean, I think about my own mother. I thought she was a feminist. She got a PhD in psychology when women just weren't doing that. She brought the ball down the field as much as she could. Now it's my turn. And I see my own daughter be a better mother to her children. It's humbling. I kind of want to go, did you know how hard I worked? And then you take that principle and you're refining it and doing it a lot better. It's a little hard.
And here you say both, like you're so happy for your grandkid, and you have your younger parts get pinged and have the it's not fair piece come up.
And I'm
And
like,
I
I have
really appreciate you
nobody telling.
normalizing that. We have all of that.
Yeah.
Like, so we
Yeah.
do go on this full healing journey, and then we still have to meet these it's not fair parts.
That it's
Even,
not fair parts.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for naming that for all of us. And it's interesting as you're working with that one. Yeah, it's like where we can continue to do the work.
Yeah. When you don't stay in a constant dysregulated state of being angry, but you can visit there. It's like you can visit and then bring yourself back and say, okay, so what's my work? What can I do?
So what I'm hearing you say is the distinction of knowing we've moved past the anger and we're not stuck in the anger. And even probably working through the anger is, are we able to slowly start to self-reflect about what we're really angry about, what we're really hurt about? And maybe deconflate, if I'm hearing these right, deconflate those, like, I'm really angry about some behavior. So I'm hearing as we deconflate all these pieces, there's the self-reflection really it comes back to. And self-reflection, bringing it back to remothering, is just us being there for ourselves in the muck of maybe I was about to say embarrassment. When we look at ourselves and we're like, oh my God, I totally did that. It's like, ah, and just being like, of course you did. You didn't know better. I got you. And then you can go repair it.
Yeah. It's a lot. I guess it's a whole enchilada. It's
That is a whole goal. As we begin to end, oh, I'll ask first of all to everyone listening. We went in many places about the good daughter syndrome and how that shows up in the healing journey. I'll ask everyone listening what's feeling important. And then, Katherine, I'll ask you if there's anything that we need to say to tie it back together or if it feels complete. So, first to everybody, what's feeling important to you here? What are you pulling from this? How has it served your journey to hear Katherine sharing her story? And the fact that she, as a practicing psychotherapist, has been doing this work for 35 years, seeing other clients, and she still shared so beautifully and vulnerably how human beings still wrestle with things, but how different it is when we're not in the vortex of the wrestling. And what are you seeing here for yourself about what adaptations you have and can begin to work with as we start to look at the tools in steps 4, 5, and 6 of the remothering framework? And Katherine, it is such a treat to get to chat with you. Is there anything more that wants to be said to tie this together as we begin to end with
I think I
everything?
started off with something personal and could end with something personal. When my mother died, the one thing that I regretted was that I spent so much time feeling guilty.
Mm.
And I even, as her spirit left her body, I even had the idea that she didn't want that for me. That I had this internal thing. If I felt guilty, that's how I kind of earned my freedom. It was a very, very unconscious notion that only came to the surface when she was gone. I didn't regret the boundaries that I set. I didn't regret the work that I had done, but I regretted, and for your listeners, if I can shorten that, help you with that piece, that your guilt is not helping anybody. It doesn't help you, doesn't help her. And more of it doesn't make you a better person.
Mm. I heard you say more of it doesn't make you, it doesn't help you earn your freedom, like this unconscious belief that if we have more of it, we'll be good enough to earn our freedom or whatever that good enough good
Like I
daughterness
feel
is.
bad, my separating. Oh, I feel bad for what that means for her. It's just kind of worthless. That's what I was hit with. That's what I regretted.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And I appreciate you trying to flatten that curve, because won't that be something to let it go all the way? How much energy we can put towards something more productive. Well, that's a really hopeful place to wrap up, Katherine. Thank you so much for your time. And folks, you'll be able to find links to how you find Katherine at the speaker page, but her website is daughtersrising.info. And then absolutely, if this talk has resonated with you, I'd highly encourage you to check out her book, The Good Daughter Syndrome, or visit her website, read her blogs, sign up for her newsletter. Katherine, thank you for putting your work out into the world and making it accessible by your free resources like your blog, your paid resources, low fee resources like your book, and then you have programs for people who want to go even deeper, and coaching for personalized support. As some of the book reviews talk about, it's life-changing to have this language for those of us that resonate with the idea of good daughter syndrome. So thank you for that.
Thank you for all the work you do.
Oh, thank you. Well, with that, folks, we will say goodbye for now, and I will see you in the next class. Bye for now.